I knew that there's no possible way she found anything wrong with or odd about my parenting. Later, though, I had some people try to suggest that that I did something weird with my son, that just because my son's hair hadn't been cut yet, and it curled naturally in ringlets, and it was just like about to his chin. They assumed that because I hadn't given him a buzz cut, he was a girl, and I was trying to cover him up as a girl. And honestly, that would have been a good plan. I didn't dress him up as a girl. But if I'm trying to get away from a torture situation and asking for a political asylum, there's nothing wrong with doing that with your child either. But that's not what I was doing. And so then we were at this Penticton immigration room. And it was just sort of a small room with carpeting. And I had my very large wool, full-length, kind of mohair and wool coat, which was good because it was sort of cold, and that kept me and my son warm. And it was just sort of, it was that. I had to turn over my personal documents and my purse over to the immigration person. But we didn't have anything else with us. We were just told to go in with what we had on it. So I had like my son's diaper bag, and then my coat, and the clothes that he had on him. And while we were in there, we were under observation. And I think people saw how closely bonded me and my son were. I can't imagine that somebody had to feel guilty. I mean, at least one person had to feel guilty. Because there was nothing wrong with me and the way that I was with my child. And if anything, it probably, even that small amount of time that they saw me with my son, they may have been shocked at how strong of a bond we had. And even though we had nothing in the room, I was able to entertain him. He was happy with just having me and playing games. And after a very long amount of time, many hours, finally, this man came in and said, well, I think there were social workers that said had a few words with me, and they talked to me just a little bit first, and then they said, we'd like to have you talk to this immigration person. And I talked to the woman and explained, why I was there and what the situation was. And then I was talking to this immigration man because the reason I was in immigration and not in jail, by the way, is because I asked for political asylum. So always, and from the very start, my arrival in Canada was to be treated as a political asylum case. It wasn't an attempt to become to emigrate to Canada illegally. It wasn't an attempt to be a citizen of Canada illegally or to work illegally. They knew from the very start that it was a political asylum case. And according to all international laws, if somebody asks for political asylum, you have to give them a hearing for political asylum, not for insufficient funds. Because insufficient funds have nothing to do with political asylum. And and that's not even why I was there. I would have been in jail because of supposedly giving false information about my name had I not declared my request for political asylum. I think once I was there asking for political asylum in the immigration, I think they took me to the immigration place knowing that that's where they had to take me for political asylum request. And then I think after Ross, I think it was Russ, after he made several phone calls and talked to people in the United States, and after people found out I was asking for, shock, political asylum, I think they decided, okay, well, she's already here at our immigration place, and you're going to have to make up some other excuse for why she's there, because we're not going to give her any chance to ask for political asylum. So sure enough, then he comes into the room and he says, I have to ask you to leave Canada. And I said, well, I'm asking for political asylum. And he said, well, you're here on insufficient funds. And I said, what do you mean insufficient funds? And I wasn't there on insufficient funds. I said, I told the woman that we would be looking around for a couple of days, and I had enough money for a couple of days. And then when your police officer, I said, and according to the law, I don't have to declare my political asylum at the border. The requirement is that you ask for political asylum as soon as it is safe to do so in the other country. As soon as possible, but as soon as it is safely possible. And he kept arguing about this insufficient funds thing, which had nothing to do with political asylum. And then he said to me, well, he said, so you want to be in Canada? And I said, yes, because I can't, my son and I are in danger in the United States. But here I was, my son and I were just being tortured in Canada too. But literally we were not at least being cooked alive. So it was a slightly better situation, at least to start. And at that point he left the room, and then he came back and he said, first he said, well, I think we might have some kind of a special program. Let me check on something. So then he checked with somebody about something, and then he came back and he said, no, I just talked to someone and you're too old. I was 32. And I said, what do you mean I'm too old? And he said, you're too old for this special program that we have. And it was like to allow people to, I guess, have political asylum or to, I don't know what the thing was. He didn't explain it to me. All he'd said to me was that I was too old. And after that, I said, I'm still asking for political asylum. And then he just tried to twist it and change everything into, like, made it sound like I had to leave the country and could not ask for political asylum because I was there with insufficient funds. And he got out a book and he read this law to me, and I just shook my head. I mean, he was lying. So Canada right there was corrupt. They did not obey the law. They violated international law, and they refouled me and my son to an extremely serious and dangerous situation which they knew was happening. They knew we were being tortured, and probably they knew the couple of things that had even happened in their own country already, because they'd set this up a couple of years ahead of time. They knew who was going to be when, who was going to be where, when everything happened. So he comes up with this insufficient funds thing and tells me I have to leave. He said, if you don't leave Canada, I will put you in jail and we will take your son away from you. So basically, I go to Canada and I ask for political asylum. Canada's response through this Russ person was to threaten me and tell me I couldn't get political asylum and that I didn't have enough money. Therefore, if I didn't leave Canada, he was going to put me in jail for trying to flee torture. He's going to put me in jail, and he's going to take my son from me. Not once did he ever say, there is a process, and we will give you a hearing for political asylum. He basically, they knew that I was there for political asylum. They heard me say this a number of times, and then they decided halfway through it to twist it into a totally different situation. And this is after they went out of the room and had who knows what kind of phone calls with United States individuals. So basically that's what he said. I started to cry.